Good morning, students. In yesterday's class, we have started with the story How Much Land Does the Man Need by Leo Tolstoy. In yesterday's class, I just summarized the story and told you and gave you a broad outline about what the story is about. And to rewind it or to put a recap of the story, let me tell you that the story is about Feom, a man who gives his life or who dies ultimately because of greed and temptation. And that is the underlying theme of the story, that a man's greed and a man's temptation have no limit. And this is what exactly Leo Tolstoy has very subtly reflected in the story. So today we'll begin with the unit-wise explanation of the story because the story is a long one and it needs a detailed discussion. So beginning with Unit 1, the Unit 1 comprises of the conversation between two sisters. The elder sister was married to a tradesman in town and the younger one to a peasant in the village. So while the two sisters were talking and sitting together and discussing the things, the elder sister, she elaborated on how comfortably they lived and how well they dressed, what fine clothes their children wore, what good things they had to eat and drink, and all sorts of goody things she was presenting before her younger sister. The younger sister was the wife of a peasant, and she realizes that her sister is in a better position, but then she says that you live in better style than we do, but though you often earn money than you need, you are very likely to lose all you have. You know the proverb, loss and gain are brothers twain. So it appears from the conversation that the younger sister is not very much happy with the life of the elder sister, and both of them are sharing with each other their own pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of their own life. And while these two young sisters are sitting and talking to among themselves, the master of the house, that is Feom, he is lying up and listening to the women's chatter. And when he listens to the conversation, he analyzes that yes, though they have a life of a peasant, and a peasant's life is awfully busy in the sense that they are always busy tilling their land and producing crops and doing all that stuff, and they really have no time to indulge in any kind of luxuries. But then he speaks a particular sentence where he says that if I had plenty of land, I shouldn't fear the devil himself. And lo and behold, when Unit 1 finishes, we have that the devil was sitting right next to the stove. And the devil says, we will have a tussle. I'll give you land enough, and by means of that land, I will get you into my power. So, subtly or indirectly, the story is, a tussle between Feom and the devil. The devil offers Feom everything. And he basically throws a challenge to Feom, let me see how you overcome this challenge. So Unit 1 finishes with this particular line, which is an important line in the story, in which Feom says that if I had plenty of land, I shouldn't fear the devil. And the devil takes us as a challenge and says, okay, I'll give you enough land and let me see what you do and how you get into my power. So in Unit 2, we have the description of how Feom is extending his property. We come to know that close to the village, there was a lady, a small landowner who had an estate of about 300 acres. She was always on good terms with the people who lived around her, and Feom was also living on rent, and he paid up, but he grumbled, and sometimes there was an argument, so he would get very angry about it. And Feom had always trouble because of the steward, and he was glad when that winter came, the cattle had to be stable, because he was very perplexed and perturbed by the cattle of another man coming into his field. Then one fine winter, there was the news that the lady was going to sell her land and that the keeper of the inn of the high road was bargaining for it. So Feom has an idea that if the innkeeper gets the land, he will worry us with fines even more worse than the lady's steward. So he thought of something. He went, so the peasants on behalf of the commune, they asked the lady not to sell the land. And the lady, she agreed that, okay, since you have come to me with a request, I will not give it. And then the peasants, they tried to arrange for the commune to buy the whole estate. And they met to discuss it, but they could not settle the matter because the evil or the devil, it was sowing the seeds of discord among them. So then Pheom heard that a neighbor of his was buying 50 acres and that lady has consented to accept one half in cash and to wait a year for the other half. So Pheom was a little jealous. He said, now just look at it, the whole land is being sold and I shall get none of it, and other people are buying. So all of them, they put their heads together, and then they had 100 rubles, and they all purchased the land. So after doing this, Pheom chose out a farm of 40 acres, some of it was wooded, and he went to the lady to bargain for it. And when he went to bargain for that, they came out to an agreement that she would be paid the deposit in advance. They signed the deed. They went to the town, signed the deed, and came back. So in Unit 2, we come to know that finally, as early Pheom was living on the rented space, in this particular unit, he is able to manage his own land. He finally has land of his own. He borrows seeds and sowed it on the land he had bought. The harvest was a good one, and within a year he had managed to pay off its debts both to the lady and to his brother-in-law. So he finally becomes a landowner, plowing and sowing his own land, making hay on his own land, cutting his own trees and feeding his cattle on his own pasture. So Unit 2 is a progression of Pheom moving towards what he is wanting in life, that is more and more of land. So when Pheom in Unit 2, when he goes out to plow his fields or to look at his growing corn or to look at the grass meadows, his heart is filled with joy. The grass that grew and the flowers that bloomed there seemed to make him unlike any that grew elsewhere. So he appears to be a contented man with what he has, and the contentment and the satisfaction, it continues to Unit 3 also. When Unit 3 begins, Tolstoy presents that Pheom was well contented and everything would have been right. Everything would have been right, I repeat, if the neighboring peasants would only not have trespassed on his cornfields and meadows. He appealed to them most civilly, but they still went on. The cows would come inside, the horses would come, and this was disturbing Pheom. And then he says, I cannot go on overlooking it, or they will destroy all I have. They must be taught a lesson. So the phenomena of these communal herdsmen, letting the cows stray into his meadows, the horses would come in the night and would destroy everything. First it was like okay for Pheom, but sooner he realized that this is not going to last for long. He has to teach these people a lesson. So he gave them one lesson and another, and the peasants were fined. And when he started finding the peasants, naturally the Pheom's neighbors, they started having a grudge for him. And one peasant even got into Pheom's wood at night and cut down 5 young lime trees for their bark. So this an eye for an eye, what Gandhiji has said would make the world blind, was indeed happening. If they would do something, Pheom would retaliate with some kind of fines, and if Pheom was putting the fines, they again would get angry, and then they would again and again decide to take revenge. So Pheom kept on thinking of some more new methods how he could do it. Finally he decided that he didn't come to know that who's actually doing it. Then he decides in his mind that it must be Simon, who else could have done it. Then this kept on happening. Then Pheom entered into quarrels with judges, and this quarrel for land, this quarrel for peace, it kept on happening for few days. In Unit 3, we also have an encounter in which Pheom is sitting at home with the peasants. He is passing through the village, and he just happened to call him. So the peasant was allowed to stay the night, and the supper was given to him. And when peasant was talking to Pheom, the stranger answered that he had come from beyond the Volga, where he had been working. And then the stories, they started building. And then he said that stranger said that the land there is so good that if you grow the rye, it is as high as a horse and so thick that the 5 cuts of a sickle, they make a sheaf. So Pheom is very delighted to listen to this particular proposal. He says that okay, I am working so hard on the land which I have got of my own, but if I get land which is more fertile, there is nothing to beat it. So then he decides and he talks to himself and he says, why should I suffer in this narrow hole if one can live so well elsewhere? He says, okay, I will sell my land, and with the money I will go over there and start everything new. So with this thought in his mind, towards summer he gets ready and he gets started. He goes down the Volga on a steamer to Samara, then walked another 300 miles on foot, and then he reaches to the place. This place was exactly the same place that the stranger had talked about to Pheom. The peasants there had plenty of land, and having found out all he wished to know, Pheom returned home as autumn came on and began selling off his belongings. He sold his land at a profit, his cattle, and withdrew from membership of the commune. He only waited till the spring and then started with his family for the new settlement. So when Unit 3 finishes, we are acquainted with the facts that Unit 1 begins with the tussle between, that's an indirect and that's a subtle tussle between the devil and Pheom, where Pheom says, if I get so much of land, I won't fear the devil. And the devil says that, okay, I'll give you a lot of land and let me see how you are not into my power. And Unit 2 begins with Pheom's transition from being a tenant of the land to being the landowner. And though leading a peaceful and contented life for a while, his contentment and the satisfaction level, it's not satiated, and he wishes to have more. And for that, probably luck is in his favor, that he meets a stranger who talks about a land which is very fertile, and he reaches to that particular place, looks and inspects the things, and then he comes back to his own place. He sells off whatever he had, his land, with the profit, his cattle, and then decides to shift to the new place which the stranger had talked. So students, till Unit 3 we have just discussed the story, and the remaining part of the story, that is Unit 4 and Unit 5 would be covered tomorrow. Thank you.